Hello, welcome back. Today I want to give you several reasons and walk you through the 21-day music challenge. This is a challenge that I completed back in May with my good friend Max, and I think it's a challenge that is open-ended and accessible to all. It doesn't matter if you've been doing music production for years or if this is your first week of having a go. So what are the rules? The challenge is fairly open-ended. Every day you must create something musical. That's basically it. It could be the skeleton structure to an entirely new song, it could be some lyrics that you've come up with maybe a piano accompaniment, or it could be something completely different. It could be you experimenting with a particular recording technique or an instrument that you don't normally use. So it's entirely up to you. However, when I completed the challenge with Max, we did add a couple of extra rules just for us. The first one being that we weren't allowed to return to any previous material that we'd come up with. It sort of forced us to not get too precious about ideas and, kept us in that sense of discomfort to come up with something new. The next rule that we had was to always submit our piece to the other person by midnight of that day. If you do decide to complete this challenge, then feel free to adjust the rules to your taste. That's just what we added, but essentially that's it. So with that said, allow me to take you on a whistle-stop tour where I walk you through each of my submissions. I probably won't have time to show all of my submissions in full, so what I've done is I've created an unlisted playlist that you can access in the description below, where you can check out all of the individual submissions. But with that said, let's get into it. So day one started and I figured that I'd play around with some of Logic's experimental guitar preamps. I hadn't had the chance to mess around with them, so I picked two, threw some chords together, built it up a little bit, added a drum, and I was left with this. I'd say it's a pretty solid start. Day two. I called this one Sad Guitar. In hindsight, it kind of reminds me of maybe like a Pound Shop Joe Satriani song, one of his quiet ones. The shredding was a little bit basic, but overall, it wasn't a bad submission. I'll take it. Alright, day three, time to turn the volume up. I called this one Punk Bass. I grabbed my guitar, slung it into a Midwest tuning because of course I would. The bass is crunchy, it's really loud, and I might return to this one because I really liked where it was going. Let's move on. Day four was much more of an experimental day. Essentially, I plugged my piano into Logic and just created some jazz chords that I then sang the individual notes of later down the line. There wasn't a key, there wasn't a story to tell, there wasn't no progression. I just wanted to see if I could do it, and yeah, it's a very short submission, we may as well move on. Day 5. This one's called Dustin Ripoff. The reason being was at the time of recording this one, I was listening to a lot of Dustin Tebbout. I'm not sure. Either way, this is the first submission with lyrics, but aside from my vocals and acoustic guitar, it's very simple. I kind of like this one, and one day I hope to return to it and flesh it out with maybe a second verse and chorus. Day 6. I called this one Cello Test. Now I tell you what, I really like the sound of a cello, but I don't own one, so naturally they don't appear very often in any of my compositions. So what I did instead was found a fairly convincing emulation and built a track around it. I really like how this one turned out. It's got a really nice mellow sound, even if it does sound quite like a life insurance commercial, but hey ho, we move. Day 7. I called this one Thrashy Guitar, but if you are a returning viewer to this channel, then you may already recognise this one. It's Midwest Emo 4. This was where I originally wrote it. I wrote it in the space of an evening, and yeah, it's certainly one that I really want to come back to. It's also proven quite popular in terms of view count when I originally uploaded it, so that's pretty neat. Day 8. This is another lyrical one. Essentially, I wanted to try and emulate the sound of modern Machine Gun Kelly. I'm not sure I quite succeeded, but what I did really like doing was this new way of writing lyrics. Essentially, I found it online where you scroll through the Amazon book list and just take phrases from titles or blurbs that you quite like and then stitch them together, adding in your own stuff and rolling with it. So that's what I did. This is what I came up with. I think the second half of the submission is way better than the first half, but I'll take it. I will definitely try using that technique again. Day 9. This one sounded an awful lot like a Ford commercial, or maybe like American whiskey, but hey, I quite like a slide guitar, who doesn't? This one is different in the sense that I used Logic's loop library for the drums. It's something I've not really looked at before, so having a scroll through there was eye-opening. There's so much stuff there, so yeah. Day 10 and 11. I've combined these two submissions because what I could say about day 10, I could basically just transfer over to day 11. It's just solo piano with minimal effects, maybe a cello. It did sort of remind me of the ambient piano you get playing Minecraft, so both of them are called Minecraft. I'm great with names. Day 12. This is Wandering Bass. I really wanted to give the bass the centre stage for this submission, so what I did was I came up with some simple guitar chords and simple held notes and panned them left and right, which left loads of space for the drums and the bass guitar, which wanders around with a really nice walking bass pattern line that I came up with. But no, overall I really liked how this one turned out, and again, this might be one that I return to flesh out. Day 13. This one sort of reminded me of, you know, like a DIY shop commercial, you know, woodwork, like hammers and everything. I don't know, it's okay. Definitely highlights the fact that I need to come up with some more blues licks because my guitar solos are looking and sounding very samey. So yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Day 14. Angry is the title. It kind of ended up sounding a little bit annoyed. I don't know, I really liked it. I like the fact that there's two ideas that are quite different from each other, like just smacked together. It sort of gave me my Bloody Valentine vibes with like, the wall of sound and the wacky effects on the guitar. I definitely might return to this, or at least try and compose again in this sort of style. Day 15. Sax. Now, believe it or not, my primary instrument is actually a saxophone. It's the instrument I've played the longest. The reason why it hasn't made any appearance on my channel is because I don't have my saxophones up with me. But I figured with this challenge I must have one of the submissions with a saxophone. So I picked a MIDI saxophone and made some of the laziest, cheapest elevator music you could ever listen to. Day 16. This one is titled Synth. At this stage, I think you could probably tell that I was getting really lazy with these names. This submission was the result of me combing through even more of Logic's loop library and just throwing together stuff, pitching stuff down, so that it all came together in this sort of very electronic kind of vibe. I'm not really sure how to describe it. It's definitely highlighted the fact that I'm able to create fairly convincing build-ups, but my drops are always quite lackluster. So if I'm going to attempt this sort of genre again, then I would definitely research and practice building better drops. Okay, day 17. By this point I was running out of ideas, so what I did was I returned to something I'm comfortable composing and I threw my guitar back into a Midwest Emo tuning. If you are a returning viewer to this channel, then you probably also recognise this one. It's Midwest Emo 4 or 3, whichever one. Midwest Emo 3 and 4 both came from this challenge, so it's one of them. Day 18, piano drone. Again, I tried using the piano as my primary instrument, which really highlights the shortfalls in my ability, but it was fun. This one, I just had this drone going and threw the beat around it. It does kind of remind me of maybe like a budget news show intro, like Discount BBC, but yeah, I kind of like how this one turned out. Day 19, jazzy sample. So at the start of the challenge, I remember mentioning to Max that one of the techniques that I wanted to look at was sampling, partly because I'd never done it before. Prior to the challenge, Logic received an update and added a pretty decent sampler from what I could tell, so I grabbed a jazzy a cappella file from the internet, threw it into the sampler, played around, found some sounds, and then built a beat around it. It's pretty basic, it's not going to win any awards anytime soon, but for a first attempt with a sampler, I'm pretty happy with the results. Day 20. This one I titled Apollo for the sole reason that the sample is just some radio chatter from one of the space missions back in the day. This one again is already on the channel. It's the astronaut lo-fi beat that I uploaded a few months ago. I kind of like this one, and also I didn't really need to do an awful lot of rearranging and retiming of the radio because it just happened to fall quite nicely into the beat of the piece that I wrote around it. So yeah, pretty good. Day 21. Now then, it's the final day. What do you think I did? Did I combine everything that I'd learned? Did I throw in a cello? Did I throw in a sax? No, what I did was I miscounted and I thought that this was day 20. So I made the mistake of getting not sober. And then in a blind panic when I realised I still had to make a submission for that day, I ran home and in the final hour of that day I came up with this. I'm not sure where the inspiration came from because I hadn't watched any French romantic movies from the 30s, but that's sort of the vibe it gives off. I titled this one I Hate This because when I realised that was the last day and that was the last submission, I was a bit disappointed because I thought I would go all out for the final one. But I also realised had I kept count, then this piece probably wouldn't exist, so yeah, there's that. So there you go folks, that's basically everything. I really enjoyed myself during this challenge because there was less pressure for me to make each submission perfect because I had less time to play with. I also had to learn to become less possessive with my ideas because, once the day was over, I couldn't return to it. This challenge also highlighted issues in my workflow that were slowing me down. There were a lot of effect chains and instruments that I'd find myself always using, so I figured I'd make myself a template to try and speed things up. And so after the challenge, I did just that, and yeah, since this challenge, I've been able to work a lot faster, so that's certainly a really good thing to come from this challenge. I've also learned some valuable lessons in song structure and lyrical ideas. I really like the lyric technique where you take it from Amazon books or any sort of books that you find. I really like that as a prompt to, marry your ideas with something else. So yeah, I'd definitely try doing that again. But that's honestly my final note. Like I said, if you've got any interest in production at all, definitely try it. And if you do and you upload your submissions, please send them to me. I'd love to see what you come up with. But aside from that, that's all. Goodbye.